Welcome to yet another episode of the Founders Speak podcast in collaboration with Culturenomics with Arjun. Joining me on the yellow table is Cherie. Cherie is actually a founder of a company which actually has got quite a cool name. It's Planner B. And she was kind enough to actually bring me a gift, which is very, very kind of you, which actually has bees made on it, right?
Yes.
So thank you for that. And she's Singaporean, as she said, and she was born and bred in Singapore, and obviously her business is based here. So, Cherie, firstly, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to what I call the yellow table.
Thank you for having me here today.
Our pleasure. I'd love to talk about Planner B, and I'm sure we will get a chance sometime in the future. But this is going to be a conversation about you as a founder and your journey as an entrepreneur, and how you sort of come along it. So my first question is actually quite open, right? And it's a question where I get to know you a little bit better, right? It's three parts to it, right? Firstly, how did you come about to becoming an entrepreneur, a startup founder? How did it all start? Secondly, talk to me a little bit about the journey from the time you established your business to, let's say, today, right? And as you're narrating that journey, talk about, a couple of events, incidents, milestones that have sort of shaped you into the founder you are today, right? Because I think, establishing a startup, running a startup, is a constant learning journey, right? So with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. So you mentioned how did I get around to doing this? I've actually always been an entrepreneur. And I think I could have been the first batch of technopreneurship graduates from NUS.
Okay.
So during my time in school, I started a clothing business with my best friend.
Okay.
We were selling clothes for 10 times the price from China to Australia. But then, she had to do something else. And I went on to an internship in an insurer in Singapore. And I got introduced to the concept of financial planning. Specifically more to insurance, and I thought it's interesting how the extension of my business degree, what I learned in school, was something that I could learn a little bit more of at an internship that was quite hands-on. But eventually I realized that I like what I did there, and I did financial planning in the first 5 years of my career. I was doing quite well, and but I didn't quite like how dated the whole system is. And I guess it's just part of my upbringing. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Everybody has some sort of business going. It's not too unusual for me to start
So
one.
it was natural.
Yeah, so I thought about it, but I think at that point it was just difficult for me to know how I could run an insurance business. So I had a partner, and we started a something like a brokerage firm. And we started giving our customers more options, but still in a very traditional way. And then come 2019, I was like, this is the time now. I think I've matured enough. Let's bring tech into the play because we need to scale the business. And so I ideated Planner B and decided that I needed to go to an accelerator to find a technical co-founder, which I ended up finding at home, who is my brother. And and then we started building Planner B, and in 2020 we launched a business. So it's been 3.5 years now, and it's like 13, 14 years of me in the insurance business. I actually don't know any other business as well. I like doing it, and I think we're finding a way to distribute life insurance in a very different way.
So fascinating, right? And as you said, right? So I guess being an entrepreneur was in your sort of DNA, or it was in the blood which flows through you. And I understand that, right? I'm actually the opposite. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I took on a life of slavery, and I'm still a slave, right? But this is not about me. Having said that, right? Everybody that I meet, irrespective whether their parents, grandparents, friends, cousins, whatever, were entrepreneurs, they all have their own sort of unique journey, right? And they all go through their own unique sort of evolution. So talk to me a little bit about the last 3 years in terms of, what has been the transition for you as an individual? What have you learned, either the good way or the hard way, as an entrepreneur?
I think that as an entrepreneur or someone who's like coming up with an idea, I own the idea. I was like, this is how I would like to do it. But as a person without any technical knowledge, it's actually quite difficult to find out how you could build everything that you envision. And explaining yourself to a technical person is actually something I learned in the last 3 years. I think that has allowed me to now be able to project manage. I've learned so much more than I did in the last, in my 20 years in school. It's crazy. I know UI, UX design now. I know digital marketing. I know how operations work. Pretty good with, Excel. Everything else that you need to know to run a business, I've had to take on that hat at some point. But the most difficult thing, I think, was figuring out that a person like me might have an idea that's actually too big to execute at one go. Knowing how to say, hey, I just need to do an MVP that looks like an MVP and not the end product of what I envision is difficult. Yeah, and on hindsight now, I'll be like, actually, I could have built a much smaller product and get it out much quicker.
So, but who told you that you needed to build an MVP? So
Everybody.
where did that realize? So everybody did.
Yeah, and I'm like, that is the MVP. Nothing
Right.
else. But you have to go through it for a person like me to know, yeah, actually they're right. You could just build something much smaller.
Okay, so that's very interesting, right? So what you're acknowledging is you had a lot of feedback. You pushed that feedback away because you were fairly, I call
Stubborn.
it, well, well, you said it. I always say that entrepreneurs don't necessarily need to be tunnel vision, but there is a tunneled focus, right?
Yeah.
There's that sort of conviction which needs to come, because the fact of the matter here is, as entrepreneurs, you get to hear a lot of things, especially if you are the kind of person who is open to hearing other people's view. And how do you separate, the advice from the noise, right? As they say, right? It's very hard. And I'm not an entrepreneur, but I've sat on advisory boards of, maybe a dozen, if not nearly 24 different companies. And I actually see a lot of founders go through those trials and tribulations, including people like me who are very opinionated, right? We've spent 20 years, we've been sort of quasi-entrepreneurs, being management consultants, had corporate jobs. So, when we are brought onto advisory boards, we believe it's our job to non-stop advise, right? So it is very hard. So you launched that product, you realized that you could have done things differently, right? What did you do right after that then?
I realized that at some point I needed to trust what I know. And despite many experts like yourself, different people who know what they're doing, founders that have gone through different stages of starting a company, I am starting something that's quite unique from what they're doing. So knowing in my gut what to listen and what to let go was difficult. I had to take everything. I'm like, I have to listen to everything, or struggle with not going through with everything like the MVP story. That is now as a founder a lot easier for me, because I'm like, okay, yeah, this is going to work for my business. That's not going to work. But that was a struggle for at least 2 years, knowing what I should take as advice that I could implement on. Or like, for example, we went through an accelerator. And despite not finding a co-founder there, I learned a lot about how the startup scene works, because I was in a very traditional finance thing, and my family we're very traditional. So learning from that, I was like, oh yeah, I need to do fundraising. I knew what it takes to make a deck that's pretty, but something just felt really quite off. And it took another 2.5 years of pitching and realizing that actually this is not a business that I'm building, the one that I've placed on the deck.
Interesting.
And having the guts to say, hey, I'm just not going to fundraise anymore, and we're just going to grow with whatever we have, is a difficult call, but it's the right one.
Interesting. And you said you never found a co-founder while you went through the accelerator?
Yeah.
Is it just because your bars are too high, or or you
It
just
has to be, right?
Right.
Because it's like, I found it strange that, you got to get married to this person in 3 days or
Fair
3 weeks maybe. But I'm like, it's hard. I don't know the person does not know me. How would I know if that person has the technical, maybe the technical skills would be vetted, but would you share the same vision?
Fair enough. It's very hard to actually do it. I have my own views on accelerators, but we don't want to get into
Yeah,
dissing
I
them.
know. Another
So,
topic.
so you actually decided that you want to work with your brother, right?
Yeah, I think he took pity on me. He's like, let me just help you. You're going crazy with all the tech stuff.
All right. So he took pity on you, which I'm sure is not quite true. How's that dynamic played out?
I think we fall on the air of overworking more than anything else, and we work very well together. As a close family, it's easy to be open, so I think that helps. I think the downsides of that is that you become too similar in terms of your style. So when we hire, we try to see if within the small team that we have, diversity if we can, in terms of at least thinking, because we're again more traditional, more maybe low risk takers, and that is not very good for a growing business sometimes. Yeah, so yeah.
So where are you in the stage of your business in terms of having raised funds, or in the maturity of the business? Give me a feel, because I want to ask some questions around that then.
Yeah, so that question, what is the scale that you're referring to?
I mean, I'm just asking. Have you done a seed round, a Series A?
Yeah. Oh, we had some angel funding, and that's how we managed very gratefully to start the business. But at this point, beyond that, we stopped fundraising. So we're sustaining.
You're self-sustaining.
Yeah.
And what's your view on that? Does a person like you, because again, as you said, how would someone know each other in 3 weeks? We've just spent 7 minutes, so I don't know you, but you do come across as someone who's got a strong conviction, believes that if there's a gap in yourself, you'll fill it through education, right? How are you going to, as a founder, accept the fact that sooner or later you will be diluting control of your business, right? To people who you'll actually never get to see sometimes, because all they'll be doing is cutting a check and sort of sending you memos on how to run your own business, and 9 or 10 times they don't know how to run their own business, leave alone tell you. So how does that dynamic play out? Is that something you've given a thought at all, or you think that that's something you'll cross the bridge when you get to?
Yeah, definitely. I think investors are good. There are different types of investors, but I don't think we're at a stage where we need that now. We're at a stage where we're growing and we're going fine without that injection. I think there will come a point where we will need that boost, and
Okay.
with that, it's dilution, but with a value add. That makes sense.
So let me turn that question around. What stage are you as a founder? Are you now cognizant that you need to learn new things? Do you need to evolve? Do you see certain gaps as your business grows? And so I don't need to know what those gaps are. What I'm actually more keen to understand is, how do you feel that you're going to go about closing those gaps?
I think I don't know if it's a founder thing, but I feel like there's so much to learn every day, so
Fair
much things that I'm learning about every day, right? But there come to a point where I can't learn everything,
Agreed?
that I need to find the expert on the thing to do, and trust that that person will do their job well. So we're seeing that now. So we're learning to hire the right person for the right job, instead of us trying to do everything ourselves, and learning how to do it ourselves.
And you're correct. I don't think this is just a founder thing. I think it is people with sort of passion thing, right? Because they feel it's their baby, or I don't know if that's the right, their pet, or whatever your favorite sort of analogy here is, and to let go is very hard, right? To be able to accept that there is someone who can do some part of that story better. So last question. I'm conscious we're sort of out of time, right? What would be Cherie's advice to bootstrapping founders, right? What would be the top 2 or 3 things that founders should be cognizant of?
I think that people should really test if there really is a need for the problem, and if the need is really now. Because I'm aware of certain parts of the product that we built, there isn't a need now, maybe there's a need 5 years later, and we're just too early, and there wasn't a point to building that part of the business. Yeah, so I think that would be building the smallest MVP ever and ensuring and validating that need through actual like field jobs. Yeah, field work.
So that's the one advice you would give everybody.
Yes, because at the accelerator, I did see a lot of business ideas that had, I feel, no need at
People
all
have over-engineered an idea, or they're ahead of the time, or they believe there's a need because they just believe that there's a need
for themselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I think, and that is unfortunately again. I don't think it's a founder issue. It's people who are actually very passionate about their ideas and concepts. They sometimes do, I have this saying that there's a good reason why we're born with 2 ears and one mouth. I actually make that mistake every day because I do think I speak a lot more than I listen. But I think as a founder who's actually getting in and is going to put their time, commitment, money, resources to it, it's very important that we actually listen to what the environment around them is saying. Cherie, pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Arjun.
Thanks a lot for the bag. I will definitely, I'll give it a shout out tonight. I will actually give it a click and I'll put it on my sort of LinkedIn account, and I'll give your business a shout out. And I'm
Thank
sure,
you.
when I'm next in Singapore, I'd love to come and hear a little bit about, what the business is actually doing and where you are in your evolution.
Love to share and hear more from you too.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for having me.